So another YouTuber who goes by the Axeman uploaded a video recently claiming victory against Electronic Arts, and he's right, we have won with Star Wars Battlefront 2. We discussed this recently, but a brief recap is, weeks ago we learned microtransactions were returning, which was a surprise to about no one, especially since Battlefront 2 was a disappointment in sales. Anyway, earlier this month we got a more in-depth description of the changes coming to Battlefront 2, which included a massive revamp on the game's progression system, which had been flawed since launch, and additionally all heroes and hero ships have been unlocked for all players, and lastly the in-game loot crates now only feature cosmetic items, rather than anything that affects gameplay. Things like star cards and weapons were also now unlocked simply just through gameplay. Microtransactions, again, are returning, and when they do arrive this month, players are only able to use real-world money to purchase crystals, which can then be spent to purchase cosmetic skins. So Electronic Arts did players right finally, and I'm happy for those who still play the game and enjoy it. Personally though, I still don't really think they deserve a round of applause for doing what they should have done from the start. And let's also not forget the EA executive who made excuses for why cosmetic skins and items were not possible because of Star Wars canon, even though it was found in the game's files that there were cosmetic items already there. Anyway, yes, because of the mass pushback against EA from the community and the negative attention coming from numerous websites and YouTubers, we won with Star Wars Battlefront 2. As even the Axeman noted in his video,
the changes could just be, a PR stunt. It could just be to get a reaction from people like me, making this video and being happy because the sun is out and kids are going to school and they're not gambling on loot boxes in Battlefront 2. Maybe this is just a ploy. Maybe it's a trap to lure us all into a false sense of hope. To which I say, time will tell. You've done something right, EA.
Also, just to note, I think the Axeman is a great YouTuber and I highly recommend you guys check his channel out, but I just have a very different perspective on this Battlefront 2 situation because I have not seen any evidence that anything will change. My biggest hopes were on the Hawaii representative Chris Lee and his anti-loot box bills that he was attempting to pass, and something that we've been discussing the last couple months. But today I can report that those bills have been defeated. As stated by the Hawaii Tribune Herald, 2 House bills and 1 Senate bill relating to video games all failed to meet final deadlines since being introduced in January, while second Senate bill was amended from its original purpose to a completely unrelated subject. The 4 bills originally would have regulated loot boxes, a controversial in some way predatory practice in video games wherein players can spend real money to purchase one or more randomized items in a system many compared to gambling. One of the House bills, HB 2686, which would have prohibited the sales of video games containing loot boxes to people younger than 21, failed to move past a single committee in the House and was killed by the end of January. The other House bill, HB 2727, would have required game publishers to disclose the probabilities for each random item received in loot boxes, as well as to display a label on a game's packaging warning about the presence of in-game purchases. That bill crossed over into the Senate and stagnated, failing to pass any further committees. Apparently, Senate Bill 3025 originally was a companion bill to HB 2727. However, the House Committee on Consumer Protection and Commerce amended the bill earlier this month to remove all aspects of its previous text and replace it with a requirement for franchisees to disclose if they are not participating in promotions of the franchise. For example, if a Hawaii location of a fast food restaurant chain were not included in a nationally advertised deal. So yeah, they turned the video game regulation bill, which would have required game publishers to disclose the probabilities for each random item received in a loot box, into some unrelated shit. It's important to understand that, like Chris Lee mentioned before, the ESA, which represents most of the big game publishers, was quietly doing things to stop these bills behind the scenes.
This is also part of the process where lobbyists chime in. And for several months, the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association of America, has been flying its lobbyists out to Hawaii. The ESA is the trade organization and lobbying arm of all our favorite companies: EA, Activision, Take-Two, Ubisoft, basically every major player in the gaming industry. The ESA lobbyists have been meeting behind the scenes with legislators.
And it has officially worked. You want to know what has changed? Nothing. The ESRB announced some stupid changes to copies of games, which will now include a label for any game that includes downloadable content. But what makes this worse is this label will not outline the difference between a game like The Witcher 3, which has paid DLC expansions, to something like Black Ops 3, which features loot boxes that include weapons. Even Polygon noted, "What is even the point?" The ESRB president, Patricia Vance, would proceed to offer an interview which included a ton of excuses of why they really are not doing anything, even at one point saying they did research, and many parents don't know what the fuck a loot box is. I guess Vance didn't think, hey, maybe Susan and Daryl don't understand or are educated on little Jimmy's microtransaction purchases. Guess they didn't think maybe that's a problem. Even Chris Lee chimed in saying, it's a missed opportunity and perhaps even a step backwards for the ESRB and the ESA. They could have taken meaningful and proactive steps, but this seems to be doubling down on loot boxes and simulated gambling mechanics. Anyway, Vance would also say that she does not think loot boxes are gambling, but a fun way to acquire virtual items for use within a game, which should be enough to know that thinking the ESRB would do anything productive wasn't going to happen. They simply needed to show that they were doing something about this issue, especially since a US senator was starting to ask questions. Unfortunately, this action does absolutely nothing and was probably just for some good PR and something to present to the senator. But yeah, that is the only change, and the EA executives who keep claiming this was a learning experience for them. Look, Battlefront 2 clearly was an example of how not to treat gamers, because nobody expected the backlash that EA would receive. Since that whole mess, it's been reported many development teams have been adjusting their games' microtransactions, one of which is Electronic Arts, who will probably not be making that mistake with Anthem and Battlefield 5. But at the end of the day, we're back to where we started before the Battlefront 2 mess, and we have to put our trust into gaming's top publishers not to be greedy with their future titles. I presented this little graph in my last video on this topic because it's something most of you should know. Most publishers are trying to normalize pay-to-win mechanics and even trying to make it sound like it's not a problem, but it is. That is the goal some of them have, and by fighting behind the scenes against any sort of regulation or even showing any attempt to regulate themselves, it shows that most of these big publishers do not want to change. Currently, we are here on this graph, with most gamers accepting of cosmetic items, but soon, in maybe 5 to 10 years, we possibly may be here. When the ESA spoke in front of Chris Lee, it was clear that they wanted to downplay this issue, and it seems that worked.
The issue of, which has been raised here with respect to in-game gambling-like mechanics, loot boxes, that sort of thing, that's something the ESRB currently rates?
I couldn't answer that. I'd have to go back.
Mr. Wade, can you answer that question?
The answer is no.
So again, when it comes to loot boxes and that sort of thing, how does a player know their odds of winning something that they're paying for?
Well, first of all, I think the loot box, isn't that if I recall, that's an option. You have the option of purchasing, or you can, and correct me, but I think you can get to the end game, the same way without the loot box. Is that, if I'm understanding what you're...
I think if people are
you have
buying
the option,
something...
you have the option to go with the loot box.
Sure. Anybody has an option not to walk into a casino, right?
Well, I mean, and you also...
But forgive me, when you buy a loot box, if that's something you feel compelled to do as you're playing, how do you know what the odds are of winning something in that?
Can't answer that.
Not enough non-gamers, maybe even politicians, care or understand how manipulative microtransactions are. And until that changes, Call of Duty will be leaning heavy on the loot box train, Madden and FIFA will stay the same, Ubisoft will stop making games as often and instead support current releases through live services. Konami will continue selling save slots, NBA 2K will keep nickel and diming players, single-player games like Shadow of War will keep offering ways to speed progression, and nothing will change until the next Battlefront 2 incident occurs. And the question when that happens is, will gamers stand up again? Anyway, I've said it from the start, I would have preferred the gaming industry did something about microtransactions themselves, but clearly flying out lobbyists and representatives to Hawaii to defeat any sort of loot box regulation is what they prefer. And I can't say I'm surprised, especially since a lot of the top publishers like Electronic Arts now make most of their profit through live services. We clearly have achieved victory with Star Wars Battlefront 2, but it seems long term, nothing has at all changed. But thank you for joining me, and what do you guys make of the loot box bills being defeated? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Also, make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video or found any informative value, and consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.